Welcome, everybody. We are here again, White Widow Sports Podcast, proving that anybody with a microphone and a camera can, in fact, have a podcast. In case anybody was wondering, you don't have to have a special license or anything like that. We just show up and hope you guys listen to us. Chris, Brian, how's your week been? Tell me what's going on.
Go ahead, Chris.
Uh, Good man. Not too eventful. Just eating good food, getting in the gym and working it off. Um, that's about all.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good week. I stayed busy at work and I get to enjoy doing a podcast that apparently you have to have a license that I didn't know about. So I'm an outlaw podcaster, I guess. I don't know. We'll see.
Talking to you, Mike Streer. Anyway,
If you know, you know. Guys, you don't have to be nice to us on TikTok. You're just giving us something to make fun of you about later on.
and we
Uh,
will.
I like the new hat, Brian. I noticed
Yeah.
that. Is that something specifically for the podcast? Are you planning on wearing that while you golf, or is it improper to get that thing dirty? It's got to stay camera ready.
No, it's probably going to be a little bit of both. I do want to give a shout out to the company Boston Scally. It's not a paid promotion, by the way. I bought these hats, but I do like their hat. I like their company. Um, it's very comfortable. Go check them out. They're all over Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff.
Good deal. Good deal. So, jumping right into the world of sports, Chris, what's kind of your big thing on your mind today?
So obviously, a lot of people watching this hockey Four Nations face-off. We just had the championship game Thursday, yesterday, as of the time of recording, between the U.S. and Canada. Before we get into that, I'll go ahead and set it up for those that don't know. This is a new event, which I guess is why I'd not heard of it before. It was announced at the 2024 NHL All-Star Game, and it replaces the 2025 NHL All-Star Game for this season. The tournament was held between NHL players from the US, Canada, Sweden, and Finland. Germany did not actually have enough players to field a team. And while Russia and the Ukraine did have enough players to field a team, they excluded themselves due to, war. Um, it's a pretty concrete reason. But on a serious note, you guys stay safe. Anyways,
Obviously, they don't take it as seriously as Canada does because there's not a war that Canada could fight that their hockey players wouldn't take a break from to go and play in those games.
for sure. Anyways, Thursday, U.S. and Canada played in the championship game in Boston at the TD Garden after both teams went 2-1 in the tournament. Uh, I was hoping to talk about this with some extra excitement, but I really can't. Canada won it 3-2 in overtime. The U.S. looked to have about five great shots to win it. Canada had about two average shots, and well, Canada's shot went in. I'm not going to go on a bitter rant or into any stats, really. I'll just say, as a Colorado Avalanche fan, it'll be great to have Cale Makar and Nate McKinnon back on our side.
I agree. But I did kind of call it, in last podcast when we were talking about the beat down that India took.
Hmm.
I told them the winning team to come play Canada, and they probably don't want none of that. So
No.
just joking, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of right there with Chris. I had a lot of hope, especially after we won the first game. We got to kind of take it easy after that because we had our spot locked in. I definitely don't think we came out complacent or anything like that. It was a very, very competitive game. I mean, I really felt like we were watching the best on the best, and they were the better teams. They came out ahead. Very, very tightly contested at the end of the first period. Score was tied at one apiece. It was 2-2 after the second period, remained 2-2 at the end of the third, and then took an overtime period for Canada to finally get that winning shot. And it wasn't for lack of trying. I mean, the United States had a lot of shots on goal in this and just couldn't seem to get that one to go in. Just all the props in the world to both teams, and Canada won a good one. It might be my just American pride that won't allow them to give anything less than a backhanded compliment. but you beat us at our fourth most popular sport. That's fine. Play us in football. We'll do a best versus best and see how that turns out.
Yeah, that might get a little rough.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
That's all I really had on hockey. So kind of a
That's
quick
all
one
I'm ever
there.
going to have on hockey. I told Chris after last night's game, I went into it so excited. It was probably the first ever hockey game I sat down and watched beginning to end. And I really wanted to win. I mean, I felt like it was an opportunity to turn me into a hockey fan. And because of the result, I told him, I was like, I'm done with hockey. I'm never watching it again. Until
I'll have
next
some
year, I'll
more.
probably watch the four face off again. But
I'll have some more hockey content. I call myself a college football expert. I'm by no means an NHL or hockey expert, but I am a fan. I'm trying to learn, trying to grow as a fan over the last 10 to 15 years. But obviously not as good as someone that grew up with it. I do have a few things before we go off hockey. Excuse the phone. Um, I had an alert today that the U.S. and Canada set a record for the most bet hockey game in legal betting history. That's a bit crazy because hockey's been going, I think, back into the 1800s. Um, Apparently, it had such a huge audience that people think that this should really permanently replace the All Star format, and I can't argue with that because you had a lot of people that wouldn't otherwise care, like Brad here, not staying up, but making an effort to watch this game. So I think this is a great format. Maybe a few other countries can join us if they can get a few more players to field a team or not be in the middle of a conflict. That could be really fun.
well, I mean, I think about it this way. It's like how many people only watch the World Cup and don't watch soccer any other time of the year
Yeah,
or,
yeah,
between the 4 years between or like, how many times do you watch a curling competition, but when it's on the Olympics, you'll watch it just to see what country wins it. I
mm,
mean, they talk about having teammates going against each other or rivals having to play with each other, kind of like a strange bedfellows kind of situation. And so, I mean, it was compelling for them being on the ice, but it was also compelling for me, kind of an outsider viewing it. I mean, I got invested in the outcome of a sport that I don't typically watch. And I mean, it's one of those great things about sports that you don't see very often. And so it's like you could tell me that there's an all-star game going on, and yes, I'm going to have a higher perceived quality of play because it is an all-star game. But that's not always true in every sport, as we'll get to here in just a little bit. But for me to have a Team USA versus a Team Canada, and for me to actively be pulling for a set of hockey players that I don't really know specifically because it says USA on their jersey, it just proves that when you get that country pride kind of aspect into it, it can mean more than just the all-star label. So I'm a big proponent of letting it replace that format permanently moving forward. I thought it was good stuff.
Sure.
And
all
then,
right. Well,
I mean, there are other sports. I mean, we pride ourselves in being a sports podcast. Obviously, like Chris said, he considers himself a college football expert more so than a hockey expert, but he is a hockey fan. We see the Colorado Avalanche behind you. Thrashers fan at one point in time when that was a thing, still would be
yes,
if it was still a thing.
yes.
Uh, but I mean, Daytona 500 just happened, and I watched the strong majority of that race. I think the part that I missed of it was because there was rain delay. So I would step away, I'd come back, and they'd be racing again. I know Brian, you watched a good bit of NASCAR growing up, more so than I did. Did you catch the 500?
I did. And it is about like any typical NASCAR event these days. They, drove fast and turned left. So, um, it really gets good kind of towards the end. Obviously that's when the wrecks happen. Uh, Talladega and Daytona, I think they're sister tracks for the most part, meaning they're very close. They're considered super speedways. So you do have the higher speed and it's full throttle all the way around it. So I thought it was a particularly good race. Um, it's didn't have, I guess the most surprising thing was the two-time winner. You don't see that a lot. It Same thing with Talladega. You don't see it there a lot. I know uh, restrictor plate racing, which means they're kind of governing how fast they can go. Back when I was growing up, there were no restrictor plates, and it was just who brought the fastest car, and the speeds got really stupid. So um, they toned it down a little bit for safety, and I don't necessarily mind that too much. I think you need to keep the athletes safe. Because if you hit a wall at 200 miles an hour, it's gonna hurt, and bad things could happen. We saw that, you know, back in the early 2000s, I believe it was 2001 with Dale Earnhardt Sr. and the passing of him. So, um, that NASCAR has come a long way for safety. Uh, you know, big props to them. Does it lead into a little bit more boring of races? I believe so. Um, they also got rid of, some of the tracks that were a lot of fun to me to watch. Darlington in South Carolina, it was a short track or mid-sized track that, it had a lot of the bumping and banging. There weren't big wrecks, but there was a lot of aggressive driving, and a lot of times it ended up in a boxing match in the parking lot. So, as a fan, again, that's the redneck coming out. It's that's what we tune in to see, and now it's just kind of okay. They're gonna run laps for 150 laps, and then the last 10 15 are gonna be really good. So
Yeah, I've got friends that are much bigger NASCAR fans than I am, and I have definitely heard about some aggressive banging that happens at these NASCAR events. So shout out to
Ooh,
Kyle.
that sounds fun.
But like Brian alluded to, William Byron, he wins the Daytona 500 for a second year in a row. He's one of 7 drivers with 2 wins and one of 5 drivers to win back to back. So a lot of people would probably be kind of surprised to see his car. He drives the 24 Hendrick Motorsport Chevy, kind of made famous by Jeff Gordon. That was his car for a long time. So if you turned on a race and you saw that one winning a race, you would think Jeff Gordon came out of retirement and still has it. But this is a driver. He's only 27 years old. He's already got 14 wins. He's got 105 top 10 finishes, and he's gotten the pole 13 times. So he is a very good driver, and that was on display this week. So congratulations to Byron, excuse me. Um, but like I said, not really a huge hockey fan, not really a big NASCAR fan, but I find myself tuning into these larger events, if for no other reason, so that I can talk about them on this podcast. And maybe I've been missing out on some enjoyable sporting events. And even like you said, talking about the safety, I mean, I watched a car flip upside down
yeah,
and run up the wall and self correct, and he just immediately kind of drops the netting down. They pull him out, and they had an ambulance that pulls up beside him, and he just like kind of walks to it totally fine, and 5 minutes later they're interviewing him off to the side, and he didn't even have a scratch on him. So it's one of those, you kind of hold your breath when you see that type of accident happen, and for it to not be anything serious and he was just completely fine, just really shows how safe these drivers really are in those machines.
yeah. And there's still bad things that can happen. Obviously you've got pit crews climbing over the wall. They don't have a protection of a car. They're out there with them. So, there still is serious danger in and out the racetrack. But um one of the crazy things that I've found with NASCAR is the point system that they've got going on. You would think they've only had one race this year, which is the Daytona 500. I know they race again tomorrow at Atlanta, but the winner of the race is actually not the one that's winning in points right now. I found that kind of strange on how they do their point system, but it does make sense. Ryan Blaney is the one that's leading in points right now, and it's because he led a lot of laps. So, I think they have tried to make that a little bit more interesting, so that it's kind of like this other sports, in that it's more spread out. You don't have you know back when it was the Winston Cup, you may have a champion, and they still have 4 more races to go or 5 more races to go. So now it's kind of they've shuffled it up to where, you know, leading the last lap may not be as important as leading the most amount of laps. So, and I believe they break it up into segment. The races are broken up into segments. Not sure if that's all races now or just particular ones, the longer ones. But I kind of like the new point system. It's a little weird to kind of get your head around, but once you do, it kind of makes sense. So, I think NASCAR, you know, I wish they would bring some of or let the drivers be a little bit more aggressive, not necessarily on the racetrack, but maybe in the pits. Bring that livelihood back to the sport. Where it was great back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and it's still a great sport. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not. Um, it's not the fanfare that it used to be, I guess. So, and you know, a lot of that may come where if you don't spend, $10 million on a car, you're not competing. So maybe that has something to do with it, back when it first started in its roots, with the moonshiners and, a group of them got together. It was, who has the fastest car? You brought your car, your daily driver to the racetrack, so to speak. And I've been to a couple of local dirt tracks, and you still see that. You don't see the daily drivers. Obviously, they are real legit race cars, but these guys don't have the money that big NASCAR sponsors have. So, they're working on their car and they all week long, and then they bring it to the racetrack. So, um, those are a lot of fun if you want to get out and see a good event. Find a local dirt track, and those fans are wild as they can be. So,
And a lot of
it's a lot
times they're having to work on it through the week because of what happened the previous weekend at the dirt track, because they get beat up pretty good. I've been to a couple of those events as well. It's a good time. It's one of those where you either learn not to wear nice clothing or you sit way up top, because those dirt track racing and the Georgia red clay, it makes a mess on you for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. I had to compose myself there for a little bit just to pull back the curtains, a little behind the scenes look. I got a split screen going on right here.
Uh,
And a few minutes ago, Brad here at the bottom, I believe it's going to be on post. He peeked around the side of one of my split screens, uh, as if to look around one of my pages and say, "What are you doing over there?" So a few minutes ago, when I was losing my composure there, that's what that was about. Uh, I didn't get to see it. The only thing I had to add, piggybacking on some of the stats that Brad laid out, was that this is, like you said, this is the fifth to go back to back, the first since Sterling Marlin in 94 95, ties him for fourth most all time wins, along with six others. And at 27, he should have the opportunity to move up that list. So tremendous potential moving forward. Richard Petty, a favorite of my grandfather's, set the bar at 7 wins. And I just don't know. When we talk about NASCAR, I can literally smell cigarette smoke right now. There's never been a cigarette lit in this house, in the backyard, the front yard, anything, but I can smell it right now. So how's that for putting the redneck back into
there you go.
sports?
Yeah, and that was another thing I was thinking about, talking about Jeff Gordon. You mentioned Petty had won this event 7 times. Jeff Gordon actually won it 3 times, and now Byron has won it twice, kind of in the same team, same number, everything like that. It's like, man, it's pretty hard to stand up to the Hendricks number 24 car. It just seems like you're destined to pull out at least a couple wins at Daytona when you drive that thing. So, like I said, props to them. I know they're over the moon right now. And just like we talked about with golf last week, a lot of these guys don't take a win and sit out a race or two to, just kind of hang out and relax and enjoy the win. They're right back at it driving the next couple of days because they're ready to win again. I mean, when the driving is good, you just got to keep at it.
Absolutely.
So I think that was really all we had as far as NASCAR goes. We've got a couple different topics in the world of basketball. Chris, tell me what's going on in Cleveland.
Oh boy. You actually brought this to my attention, and when I was going to look into the story, I thought I was going to be a lot more positive, and so spoiler alert, I'm not going to be. So, not to step on Brad's toes because I know he's got some of the same notes. This Cleveland Rockers was one of the original 8 franchises, played from '97, 2003. They won no championships of any kind. They were runner up in 2000. The team was owned by the Gund family. They decided to just cease operations, citing a lack of revenue and bad attendance. Here's the thing: the popularity has definitely grown in the last 2 or 3 years. That sort of thing is still very much a problem. The NBA is still fully backing the league. According to my research, and I may be wrong, the league is operating at a big loss when you compare revenue to operating costs. The WNBA has actually never turned a profit, and will continue to rely on the NBA to carry them along in hopes of someday actually achieving that. But I don't see it on the horizon. So here is what I want to say about that. As far as the Rockers returning, which they're set to do in 2028, supposedly, I'm happy for that fan base, however big or small that may be. But you should not saturate a market that is already on life support and has been for 28 years. Another thing I'll note that I brought up before on this channel, I'm not sure if that video made it to YouTube, but we did record it and we did talk about is the talent gap in the women's basketball game compared to the men's. The elite male, like LeBron James or Giannis, will sometimes get schooled by a lesser name just having a good night. In women's ball, I just don't, I don't see that happening. The difference between all star and a bench player can sometimes seem like an adult against a toddler, and it's not as bad as the college level, or it's not as bad as the talent gap in the college game, which is what we talked about in that particular video. But it's still not good. So does the landscape change between now and 2028? Yeah, a little bit. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are likely bigger household names by then on a grander scale. They're already pretty big names, but I just don't think things will change enough to consider expanding into a saturated market, as I said, anytime in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of hitting on some of the things that you said. Rockers were named after Cleveland's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
Obviously, they've got the Browns, they've got an MLB team. I mean, there's a lot going on. It's definitely a sports town, but that doesn't mean that just because other bigger sports have notable fan bases and they've got decent attendance, that you can just automatically plant a team in there, especially one that's failed once before, and expect it to thrive again now just because Caitlin Clark effect is showing some good numbers and things of that nature. I mean, even like what Chris was saying, the Gunn family owned that franchise. They essentially said that they did not want to own it anymore, so the team was put up for sale, and nobody wanted it. Nobody would invest in it. So the team just basically disbanded, and there was a dispersal draft, and all the players that were in Cleveland got sent to other franchises as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah, do I think that's going to happen again? Depends on how much money the NBA wants to shell out to keep it alive. If they are as dedicated as they want everybody to believe that they are, is making WNBA a larger thing and making sure that the talented women players have a place to play, then yeah, I mean, it could be a success. I'm not saying that it's not, but it's going to take the Paige Beckers, it's going to take the Juju Watkins, it's going to take these high profile players continuing to cycle through and basically earn a market share, earn a TV audience, earn jersey sales and ticket sales, most importantly. And only time will tell if that's actually going to happen.
I think you brought it up. Atlanta, we have the Braves, the Falcons, the Hawks, teams that have been around. And then they brought it up, or it was brought up earlier about the Thrashers that
Right.
were in Atlanta. And basically the same reason, we're huge sports fans in Georgia, but I don't know that ever really took off. And I think you're going to see some of the same with this.
It kind of did. I went to a Thrashers game. Not to date myself. I know we've talked about dating each other on here before out of
Ooh,
context. But that was in one of their last seasons in 2010, which, in my head was a few years ago, but I guess was 15 years ago. Atlanta did have a decent hockey fan base. It wasn't always perfect, but I don't think even me as a fan is even like really wanting it to come back. If Atlanta's actually one of the only, let's see if I'm pulling this stat off correctly. Atlanta is one of the only major sports markets to have a team come and fail twice with the Atlanta Flames, I believe, before that. So I don't know. I mean, failing one time, I think, is enough. And this isn't just to go into a different sport. This is, well, no, it's the same sport. My bad. Wine. Um, this is not like a Seattle Supersonics situation. They kind of had the team ripped from their hands. They were still very much supportive, but in certain situations, if you fail in that grand of a fashion, I don't know what makes you think it's going to be a huge success another time around. Even though the popularity has grown a little bit, it has not grown by 10,000%. So.
And I view that same way that I mean I know you're drawing that conclusion, but I view hockey and the WNBA as the exact same thing. It's just because a lot of people watched and bet on Team USA versus Team Canada doesn't mean that you can drop the Thrashers back in Atlanta and see a huge uptick in lasting popularity and support. And Cleveland, getting their WNBA team back isn't going to be a necessary fix all just because a lot of people watch Caitlin Clark and we'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
Staying in the world of basketball, but moving over to the NBA. This past week was the All-Star week. We had a dunk contest. We had an All-Star game. Kind of a different format than what was usual. I'm sure Chris has a lot of information about that and kind of the way that it shapes up. Brian, I know you're not really a big basketball fan, but is there anything about the All-Star week that you like to watch? Anything that kind of captures your attention with it?
It was definitely different. I think I don't know that it's a winning formula yet, but it could be. Um, I like the little mini games, little playoff kind of things. I've got the stats pulled up here of who won what, but I it's something different. I don't know if years past it's just that All-Star game kind of dropped in numbers. Nobody kind of like watching the Pro Bowl with the NFL. I definitely don't think they have the winning formula with the NFL yet. I'm not a big fan of that. But with this, I mean, it was some basketball games, and it was kind of fun to see the best of the best, so to speak. I think they did a good job as far as breaking up the teams. You had the up and comer young squad, and then you had the OGs, and um,
The international.
I think it's pretty good. I don't know. What about you, Chris?
I can answer one of the things you said there. I think the reason that changed, and I may be wrong on this, but if I'm remembering correctly, the reason they changed the format is simply because all the stars were in the West. Uh, I don't know if I'm making that up in my head or if that was actually the case, but almost every star outside of LeBron James at one point when he was at Cleveland and Miami. They were all in the West. Kobe was over there. All the Lakers, all the Suns with their stars, and then it just with trades and stuff, a lot more just went over to the West. Golden State, of course, and I think the East didn't have a as flashy of a team. Um, I've got, if Brad would like to step in on anything, I've got a list here, much like we did last week with the NFL honors, to just go down competition event by event and do that. But if Brad wants to add anything to the overall thing before I get into that, I do have a lot on this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have quite as much, and I don't want to spoil the ending for those that are getting their basketball news by this podcast. It's a questionable strategy, but we'll see how it pays off for you. But there was a few guys that did not actually make it into the All-Star games that were selected as All-Stars. So you've got Giannis Antetokounmpo, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and Anthony Edwards. All of those are huge names in the sport. None of them played in the tournament due to injuries. Giannis was replaced by Trae Young of the Atlanta Hawks, so we like seeing that. And Kyrie Irving took Anthony Davis's spot. But LeBron James and Anthony Edwards actually pulled out too close to the event to have any kind of replacements. And that ended a streak of 20 consecutive All-Star games started by LeBron James, which I believe is the record that he broke last year, perhaps. So it always sucks when you have these kinds of games and people that deserve to play in it don't get to because of one thing. But I do think that format-wise, we talked about, formats being changed like in the hockey game and whether that's going to be successful in the long run will remain to be seen. But one thing that I do like kind of about these NBA games is they're almost like an exhibition where it's first to 40. They don't play a full-length game and ask these guys to say, hey, you're really good at this, so we're going to reward you by giving you another full-length activity. You're going to get even more tired, and you don't really have much to show for it. You're already, obviously, if you win MVP, like we'll talk about who did in a moment, I'm sure that's just another, accolade for your career. But being named as an all-star or a Pro Bowler, that is the achievement in of itself. The game is just kind of a spectator thing that you don't really get much for. So to scale that back a little bit, I know people complain about it not being as competitive. But if you ask somebody like, hey, do you want to play a full length game and add that to your schedule or play first to 40? A lot of them are going to view that kind of like a pickup game, and it might spark that a little bit, less wear and tear, less toll on their bodies at this stage. I think that was pretty cool. But yeah, heading into the results, I'm here for it.
Yeah, so the first to 40 was a new thing this year. I think last year or the year before, both teams went to like near 150 or even over. I can't recall. I'm generally a huge fan of the NBA All-Star Weekend, despite its half-assed nature in the game itself. I take it for what it is, which is just a series of events designed to show off a little. So what I'll do is just run down the events. If anybody has anything to say, just like Brad with the NFL honors last week, we'll stop there. If not, we'll just go on. One or two of these is kind of boring, so we will just brush past it, but give them a shout out. So first off, we have the 3-point competition, which was won by Tyler Hero of the Miami Heat. First-time All-Star and a former Sixth-Man of the Year winner in 2022. I believe he's best known for his contributions in the 2020 playoffs, if memory serves me correct. He had several 30-point games, and I think he was one of the youngest people ever to have multiple 30-point games at his age at that time. And, he really helped the Heat reach the finals, and he helped them reach it again last season. So anything on the 3-point competition?
Well, I think I would just correct you and say that his greatest contribution is the song by Jack Harlow.
I'm not familiar. Please.
There's a song by a rapper named Jack Harlow, and it's literally called Tyler Hero.
Oh,
more people know that song than know who Tyler Hero is. So,
well, I believe you.
I don't know either.
Yeah, he's a relatively new name.
Get on to the dunk contest. We know.
All right.
That's what we want to talk about.
Well, next we had, my absolute favorite event is the slam dunk competition. It was won by Mac McClung of the Osceola Magic, which is the G League affiliate for the Orlando Magic, obviously. And you guys, this was the third year in a row that he won the contest. And also, in case you don't know, he's white. And don't try to sell me on the white men can't jump thing, because that doesn't apply to him or me. At one point in my life, that was by far my best athletic attribute. And I even have a high jump medal from high school track and field. Anyways.
But did you ever jump over a Kia?
No.
Because Max McClung did that.
In my defense, I didn't try.
3 times he's won the dunk contest. That white man can definitely jump. I've seen him do it. Kind of a funny stat that I saw this week. He has actually won more money by winning these dunk contests than the sum of all of his contracts over the course of his playing career.
Wow.
And I think it's like 3 times as much. It's not even close.
Well, he's only appeared in about 7 NBA games, I believe. He stayed down in the developmental league most of the time. So that's not hard to believe.
Yep.
Anything to add there, Brian? I got a few more things to say
No,
about it.
go ahead. You got this.
So some of my personal favorites have all won the slam dunk contest, and I tend to favor guys that will take it to the rim and dunk in your face in a real game setting over the guys who step back and shoot threes all the time. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what Steph Curry does. It obviously wins championships. That's just not my style personally. Some of my favorites that have won this in the past um, are Zach LaVine, Dwight Howard, Josh Smith, Vince Carter, Dominique Wilkins, Michael Jordan, and maybe my all-time favorite of this style of play, Blake Griffin, especially when he was with the Clippers. Also, a shout out to Aaron Gordon, who was runner-up twice and had some best dunks in the competition's history. You'll always be my slam dunk champion somewhere in my heart. And guys, the last thing I want to say about this, I want to pose a question. After 41 years of props, body contortions, and tricks, have we seen everything that can be done in a dunk by a human body? After so many combinations of moves, you think you'd run out of things to do eventually.
I mean, they say there's nothing new under the sun.
Mhm.
Maybe on a general level, yes, somebody's thought about it, somebody's done it, that sort of thing. Um, but I mean, it's kind of like this year, somebody jumped over a Kia. McClung jumped over a Kia. I think he had a guy standing through the sunroof holding the ball. He jumped over the car, took the ball from him, and dunked it. And that you could say that's a first. Well, next year he might do it over a Jeep Wrangler, and he'll be the first to do that. Who knows?
Not the first. Blake Griffin jumped over a Kia. People are giving him. Sorry, I wanted to use the word. Why not? We've got editing. I wanted to give people are giving him some shit because Blake Griffin jumped over the hood of a Kia, and McClung jumped over the damn near top of it. So very
It
impressive
was the
play.
top. He took the ball from the guy in
Yeah,
the sunroof. So he
yeah.
not only
So
had to clear the vehicle, but also the guy giving him the ball. Do not compare what Blake Griffin did to what Max McClung did. It's not
just
the
giving
same.
Blake Griffin some love. Wearing the jersey, of
Undeserved.
course.
That's like saying Josh Allen deserved to be MVP. It's just completely unfounded.
And you can catch all that in that discussion in our previous episode, and we'll pop that up here in the corner. If you want to talk about or see us talk about Josh Allen in that discussion. Moving on, the Rising Stars tournament saw Team C beat Team G League, the MVP going to the Spurs. Stefan Castle in a short game that only went to 25. I don't have much more to say about that one. If anyone does, go ahead.
I
All
don't
right.
watch G League basketball, not even for Bronny James.
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't seen it myself. Team Cavaliers won the skills challenge with Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. That's a rather boring event, in my opinion. So we can just brush right on past that. Here's a fun one. The Celebrity All Star game is fun sometimes. Kevin Hart was entertaining for a few years as a player and then as a coach. And then he did this whole thing where he came off the bench as a coach, ripped off his clothes, and went in the game. Justin Bieber was in it in the past, which was an interesting thing to see. This year we had Team Bonds beat Team Rice 66-55. Team Bonds was coached by Barry Bonds and 2 Chains. The other was coached by Jerry Rice and Cobby Lame. Have no
Oh,
idea who that is.
he's the TikToker. He points things out that don't make sense, and he's known for going.
Okay. White
Yeah,
Widow
yeah.
Sports is new to TikTok. We've had some great success, some critics, some not so great success. Please follow us on there if you can find us, White Widow Sports TikTok. Anyway, So actor Rome Flynn was the MVP of the game with 22 points. Flynn is best known for his role in The Bold and the Beautiful, which my mom used to watch all the time in the 90s. Good soap opera stuff. He won an Emmy for that in 2018. Just looking through the rosters, I've only really heard of Kai Cenat and Noah Khan. I've heard a few songs of his. I actually just discovered him kind of recently. My wife likes him on Team Bonds. And then on Team Rice, we had WWE's Bailey and Terrell Owens. There were also some former NBA players and current WNBA players on the rosters too, but I don't really count those, and it kind of diminishes it for me. So, any thoughts on the celebrity game, guys?
Yeah, that was kind of one of the event that I really wanted to see that I didn't catch. I wasn't aware when it was actually happening live, and then I started seeing a lot of clips on Facebook, and that's how I learned that I missed it. I mean, we talk about wrestling a little on this channel. It's something that we've gotten more into as of late, and it would have been cool to see Bailey play, just because that's something I know her from. Obviously, you see a soap opera actor coming in and just start bawling. That's unexpected. But to see somebody that you actually know from something else and to see their performance, I think would have been cool in its own unique way. And I heard she actually had a really good performance and did well. So I hate that I missed it, but I can't really comment on anything other than highlights. So
I don't have Bailey's stats in front of me, but if I'm not mistaken, just watching wrestling documentaries, I'm pretty sure she was a very accomplished women's basketball player, or maybe I'm thinking of someone else. But let me know in the comments if anyone wants to correct me on that. I think she was there was a women's wrestler that was a very surprisingly good women's basketball player.
was it Jade Cargill?
I saw that live in person, and while she was good for the level she was at, no, that's not who I was talking about.
Maybe it should have
Brian,
been.
anything on the Celebrity All Star game there, Brian?
No, but I did kind of, as I was listening to you and talking about the slam dunk being your favorite because you can jump. I am the white guy that can't jump, and I'm short, and I was the one that I was picked last for basketball, or just not picked most of the time because I had no interest in it. So I am a fan of the 3-point shot, um, but not a huge fan of basketball. So with that being said, I'm not gonna watch All Stars. I'm not gonna really get too involved just because I've got other sports that I'm watching that I am involved in. So that's
Yeah, not a lot of explosive athletes in our family. Um, when they tried to measure Brian's vertical leap, they reminded him that his feet actually have to come off the ground for that.
yeah.
And
I don't know. I wouldn't go that far now.
he didn't like that rule, so he quit. That was
Yeah,
the story that I heard.
Oh,
yeah. Well,
it's disputed apparently.
we'll leave that one alone for now. That's another episode unto itself.
I was going to be a douche and grab my high jump medal and wear it for the rest of the episode, but I have taken the high ground. Anyway,
Did you
no pun
jump up
intended.
there?
No pun intended, actually. No. Stop peeking around the side of my screen, man. I'm going to get
I'm
off
looking at your
track.
notes to make sure I don't repeat anything you say. Look, Steph
Anyways,
Curry MVP. It says right there.
all right. It does eventually say that, yeah. Finally, the All Star game itself. This year we had a 4-team format, which was the newest and so many quirky ideas since we had the days of East and West. Finals, we had Team Charles Barkley or Team Chuck, which mostly consisted of international players or international born players, versus Team Shaq, which consisted of guys who have consistently been all stars in recent years. Team Shaq won 41-25 in a first to 40 games. Steph Curry was named the tournament's MVP, mostly because the game was in San Francisco and he had a half court shot. I'm kidding, sort of. It is noteworthy that, yeah, like you said, LeBron sat out and you went over the others that sat out and all that. So don't need to go back into any of those. But yeah, it was halfway entertaining game. You got to take it for what it is, which is just people throwing alley oops to themselves, not playing much defense. I enjoyed I enjoyed it a bit, not as much as I have in other years. Wasn't a whole lot of crazy alley oops or anything like that, but no one wants to get hurt, even though that ended up happening. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. It didn't happen in the game, but no one wants to get hurt. They just want to put on a little bit of show, a little bit of a show for the people in attendance, and I think they achieved that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's interesting, I've mentioned those 4 players that did not play, and 2 of those players were actually on Shaq's teams. So he
Mhm.
only got 1 replacement All Star. The other one did not get to be replaced, and that was LeBron James. And despite that, they did still win the All Star game. So they were left with Tatum, Durant, Curry, Harden, Lillard, with Kyrie, who was one of the replacements, and
Mhm.
Jalen Brown as their 2 reserves. Most teams had 3 reserves, but they were down a man. But they ended up winning 41-25. Steph Curry, like you said, won MVP. He had 12 points and 4 rebounds. The highlight of the game was that half court shot. He kind of just ran up to half court, threw it up, and it just went in like it always seems to when he does that sort of thing. It's almost a typical ho hum kind of highlight for him, but there was a clip circulating internet where a lot of other players were trying to do a half court shot and they weren't getting anywhere close, like not even hitting backboard. They were airballing it coming up short. And then Curry threw up a half court shot in the middle of all of them and it went in just straight through. So he really does make it easy. He's the greatest shooter of all time. So there's not really an accolade that he can get that's undeserved at this point. He was outscored by Tatum, who put up 15 from the Celtics. And then SGA also put up 12 points on a 5-for-5 night. So maybe that's just another testament to how little defense is actually being played in that game. Uh, but again, to scale it back, make it fun, which is what it's supposed to be, and let those guys kind of enjoy a different format. I'm all for it. I don't think it's anything bad.
And
Yeah.
to kind of bring it over to my world a little bit, Steph Curry in the 3-point shot, he plays in a lot of celebrity golfing events, and he is an incredible golfer. Uh, you know, he legit could I think keep up with some of the pros on the tour.
Yeah. I think I guess the only thing left to say is, and I think everyone on God's green earth could agree that we would have liked to seen Cam Scattaboo on the one of the All
Yeah,
Star teams for the celebrities, and I think a missed opportunity there, and I'm sure we'll see him in the future. Maybe be a Hall of Famer in that capacity as well. I was going to save
Look,
this till later, but came out a few days ago that Victor Wembanyama actually has a blood clot in his shoulder and is going to miss the rest of the season.
mm,
He played pretty good in the All Star game. I saw him throw down a dunk off an assist from Trey Young. A little shout out there to my guy. That's kind of crazy because he was just having a fantastic season. Just uh, was gonna win some awards at the end of the year, and this is just a huge blow to the Spurs. So wish him well. Not a Spurs fan, but to see a guy having such a great season just get derailed by something that is internal as a blood clot and not even a twisted knee or nothing. It's just that sucks. But that's all I have in basketball. If anybody else has anything to add there.
well, I mean, it wasn't really that long ago that we were on this podcast talking about the NBA trade deadline, and the Spurs were buyers at the trade deadline because they knew with the kind of season that he was having that they were true contenders this year. I think
Right.
he really surprised everybody with how good he was last year, and he's only gotten better. And so they made moves to surround him with more talent, and I don't think that they realized at the time that they were going to be trying to find the stars that would keep them afloat in his absence, because it was announced that he's not going to play for the remainder of the year. Huge blow.
Yeah.
Um, and to go back to the other thing that you mentioned, I think the NFL Combine is about to start. We'll be talking about that very soon. And so maybe he's just preparing for that. But I think the deep seated reason that we didn't see Cam Scatterboot in the All Star festivities is
Mhm.
because he didn't want to take the shine away from the other people. He's a very selfless athlete. He's not somebody that likes to take the attention away from others. He's extremely humble. And when we're talking about the exciting whites, I mean, I just think that he wanted Max McClung to have his
Yeah,
shine,
no,
and
no doubt.
he'll get his own when he blows up the combine next week or week after, whenever it starts. So
He's
uh,
preparing to jump over a Hummer in next year's dunk contest. So
so props to Cam Scadaboo for being the humble athlete that we need but don't deserve.
yes,
But other than that, I don't have anything else as far as All Star Week.
I would say this would be a good segue moving from an all-star such as Mr. Scattaboo over into a show that I really enjoyed when it was on, which is, Last Chance U. Uh,
yes.
and what's going on over there. Ugly lawsuit looks like it's going to get ugly. Um, Brad, you want to talk about it for a minute?
Well, yeah, and a lot of this, the first two seasons, there were 5 seasons of this show. The first 2 seasons revolved around East Mississippi Community College, and that's kind of where all this is coming from. You've got 6 former players are suing not only Netflix but also the JUCO Association and the program director. They're seeking $30 million in damages because they're saying that their likeness was marketed as part of the show. There was merchandise that was sold as a part of their on the show, but they didn't receive any compensation for that. And they also say that they were portrayed in a false light and it damaged their reputation. I'm a little confused by that. So maybe Chris can give me a little bit more info, or maybe you, if you're more familiar. The whole point of the show is that you're at this last chance opportunity to try to make something of yourself because of the poor decisions that you had made up to that point. And so I don't really think that you can blame, or certainly not sue Netflix for painting you in a bad light when the only reason why you were at this school to begin with is likely because you were in a bad light on your own accord. So y'all can educate me if I'm wrong on that. I was a little bit confused by what the lawsuit was alleging there, but
Yeah, it did have to do with name, image, and likeness, or that sort of thing, which is obviously a thing that you are paid for now in college athletics. That would be a thing that athletes would get a few years later on after those seasons came out. Um, I'm on Brad's side here. Well, I guess I
oh,
haven't
thank you.
technically heard Brian's side here, but I am on that side that you've already brought up. I personally don't really know what to think. I feel like they maybe should have gotten something for being part of a very hit show. They actually, what I had in my notes here, they won a 2020. I know it wasn't the East Mississippi guys that did that. They won a 2020 Emmy for outstanding serialized sports documentary, and like so you look at TLC shows. Those reality personalities get like the 600-pound life, or my personal favorite, Return to Amish. Don't ask me why. It's just something I got into. They get a little money from their stories and their stuff. It's not in the $30 million range though, and I personally don't think this should be in the $30 million range. If you watch the show and get to know their personalities, like Brad said, a lot of them are greedy, selfish guys that have made some mistakes. And I don't know that you're going to convince a lot of people otherwise. This lawsuit really doesn't surprise me. Just looking through the list, none of them actually made it to the NFL in any real capacity or even had a notable college career after leaving, other than Jermaine Johnson II, who went to Georgia and Florida State, was then drafted into the first round by the Jets, where he remains to this day. He's actually not a part of the lawsuit, go figure. I just think these guys had some spotlight. They tried to redeem themselves, looking for a big payday and set their sights on Netflix. And I just don't think that the amount they're looking for is realistic. But you never know what happens in the court of law.
I think we all have the same opinion here. I think they're seeking something that they really don't deserve because NIL didn't come out till later. I mean, that would be like some of the older players when we had NCAA football. One of the reasons why it went away was because of that, because the players weren't getting paid off that, and they're like, wait a minute, you're using me in your game, literally, my name, my number, everything. Um, so that would be like them going back and trying to sue, uh, you know, um, and recoup that money. Well, NIL was not a thing. What are you suing for? So I agree. I think this should get dumped. I think they're after another payday because they are out of chances. No pun
Right.
intended.
Yep.
So actually there was some intended there, but
Fair enough.
I mean, just like a small correction. Going back to the NCAA video games, they didn't use the names of the players on there, but it's
yeah,
like
you're right.
you're still using my likeness. If you were to put on NCAA, 2005, and
Mhm.
you've got USC, you're playing with the Trojans, and you've got running back number 5, it doesn't tell you that that's Reggie Bush. But when you run for 300 yards in a game, you kind of get a good idea of who that's based off of. And if Reggie Bush can get his Heisman uh, re-awarded back to him because of the NIL thing, maybe I don't blame these guys for trying to get something. I know enough of negotiation to say you set the bar up here when you're expecting to get here.
Yeah,
You're just trying to scale back to that.
Mhm.
So, do they get $30 million? Probably not. I mean, they're splitting it between 6 people. So I mean, they're looking at 5 million apiece if it was split, evenly between them. Maybe they only get $12 million and they only get 2 million apiece. That's still way better than where they're at now because obviously their football careers didn't make them the money that they were hoping.
Another thing about what actually got all that started, or the video games taken away specifically, was actually a basketball player by the name of Ed O'Bannon, who I guess is going to be the opposite of what Cam Scatterby is to this channel, is just enemy number one. And believe me, we're not the first people to make him enemy number one. He was a basketball player, I believe, for UCLA in the late 80s. Just wanted to get his name out there, in my opinion. Like, I might get dumped on for this, but I think he's a selfish guy that took away a lot of things we love. But I guess it did lead to a good thing. A debatable good thing. There are some good things about it. There's some horrible things about it. We're talking about you, Carson Beck, and others among those. But yeah, I would estimate that they'll get something, have to split it up, pay some taxes and lawyers, and they'll get $100,000, which they won't see by the following year.
You brought up Carson Beck. I actually just saw not long before we started recording that somebody has been arrested for the burglary and theft of luxury sports vehicles owned by Carson Beck and Hannah Cavender.
Yeah.
Welcome to Miami, Carson Beck.
For real, I don't know if that was a big surprise when I saw that story. And if you got that kind of money that you're able to buy all that in college, like, I don't know, maybe a different discussion for a different day. It's just hard to feel sorry about. Hard to feel sorry for you. Maybe these guys on Last Chance you should get a little compensation, but no one should be out there. You were on a Netflix documentary where you were portrayed as a screw up, whether you flunked out or got arrested or something. I don't know what dollar figure you're realistically hoping to get, but it ain't Carson Beck money, and no one's coming to steal your car in the middle of the night.
We don't want your Honda Accord, I promise you.
No, you get a
But
car good enough for Matt McClung to jump over, then we'll be talking.
I'm glad that we got to make fun of Carson Beck and liven your spirits up because Chris, I want to be honest with you. I've been looking at you through the podcast and you seem a little sad. Is there something that's getting you down? Is there something that you need to get off your chest and talk about? What's got you down, my brother?
I don't know. We might have to cut this out. What the hell are you talking about?
I'm talking about Zack Martin retiring.
Oh, yeah, I got you. All right. So,
You told me to tee you up and say, hey, is there something going on?
My bad. Well, I didn't know that was about to happen right now. Okay.
Oh no,
Anyways.
we're leaving this in. We're leaving it in. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're leaving this in. Anyway, Zach Martin's retired. I'm a Cowboys fan, 9-time Pro Bowler. You just can't replace that. You're not often going to replace that. And I'm just great career, probably a future Hall of Famer. It's going to make things tough for a team that needs a little offensive firepower, and definitely keeping Dak Prescott protected is part of that. Uh, don't know where to go from now. Perhaps we'll talk about it in free agency and draft videos. But
But
thanks for
that's
everything,
what
big man.
I know we've got it on our plans. I wanted to tease it a little bit with the. I think you'll like some of my predictions when we get into those free agency video, which should come out here shortly.
What I said.
I think you'll, as a Cowboys fan, you will definitely like where I head with some of my picks.
Looking forward to it.
And without getting too far into that, I mean, just Chris, off the top of your head, do you think that this changes perhaps some of the draft plans for the Cowboys? A lot of people had already predicted that maybe this was a little bit of a lost year. The Schottenheimer hire promotion to head coach was not one that was well received by a lot of people. And obviously, we'll get more into draft prospects over the coming months. But I've seen a lot of people say that Ashton Genty to the Cowboys is a very popular landing spot. I've seen Luther Burden, a very talented wide receiver from Missouri, was another option to get a true running mate with CD Lamb. But do you think that's enough to kind of shift the offseason focus for Dallas? Because the Great Wall of Dallas, as we know it, has lost. I mean, it's got a big hole in the wall. Now with Martin retiring, do you think that because they've had so much troubles with their run game, with Dak Prescott getting hurt, does the focus now have to shift to securing that offensive line again before they can worry about adding those other skill players in Dallas?
I think it's got to. You're the draft guy. I'd have to look at the draft board. I'm sure you've studied it pretty good. If there's a guy there that makes a lot of sense, I feel like more times than not, when you're picking out a first round offensive lineman, it's worked out a lot lately. Those guys have really come into their own, and they've been very valuable for upwards of 10 to 15 years. So if there's somebody there that makes sense, I think you need to go ahead and take it and see what you can build in the other positions you mentioned in free agency. May not be realistic, but I think for someone for a position that historically has a lot of longevity and success, you need to take it if it's there.
Yeah, and I know we didn't really intend for this to be part of the conversation, but that's the good thing about these things is sometimes it just kind of flows that way. To answer a little bit of your question, as you kind of get more familiar with the draft class, not a very deep tackle class. A lot of your really good offensive linemen in this draft class. The big concern that you see consistent with a lot of them is they played tackle in college, but do they have to shift to guard as a pro? And so you're seeing that there aren't a lot of really good tackle prospects, but maybe guys that could be really good guards at the next level, and that might be perfect for Dallas. I'm not saying they use their first round pick on one,
Right.
but if you're looking at adding a running back, maybe they don't take Genty. Maybe they do take that offensive lineman to shore it up in the first round and then turn around and add a running back in the second round because,
Like who?
I mean, in most draft classes, you're getting maybe 20 running backs coming out of college that get a draftable grade. I mean, all these prospects, they get a grade when they come out of college. Usually you get about 20 that are considered draftable within a class. There are 32 running backs currently with a draftable grade, enough for every team to get a new running back, like they attended an Oprah show and there was just Cam Scatterbo under their chair. You get a running back and you get a running back. So it's very possible that Dallas now shifts focus to offensive line in the first round and then add a running back maybe on day two.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if you had looked that deep into it or
No,
how important you thought this was. You're going to be a lot more familiar with Dallas and their depth chart. You might say, similar to the Eagles, they lost Kelsey and they say, it's okay. We've got Cam Jurgens waiting in the wings. He's been prepared for this role. We have a lot of faith in him. And obviously, we saw how the season turned out for Philadelphia. You might have come and said, no, I'm not worried about it. Obviously, it hurts to lose Zach Martin, similar to losing Jason Kelsey, but we've already got a guy behind him that's just great. He'll slot right in and we'll be fine. So I just didn't know if you knew anything like that quite yet.
I don't. And I think when you're talking about him, it's going to be it's real hard to replace. You're not going to have an Eagles situation like that too often. And I could be wrong. I don't have the depth chart in front of me, but I just don't think there's a guy able to replace a 9-time Pro Bowler right now off the top of my head.
Well, good news is that gives us one more thing to talk about the closer we get to the draft.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Was there anything
All right.
else on your lists?
Well, before we wrap things up, I do want to give a couple of shout outs. I'm going to steal one of Brad's, one of his guys, and he may not want me to steal it, so he may jump in here.
Go ahead.
So, young man named Brandon, who is a loyal follower and subscriber, and we want to give him a big shout out. I know Brad, you go to church with the young man. So do you wanna talk about him for just a second?
Well, yeah, I mean, Brandon has some trouble at home. And I say that jokingly because whenever he does not like something his actual dad says to him, he claims that he is going to go live with me because Brad would be a rad dad. So I jokingly call him my son sometimes, and he was a little hurt. Last week we posted the podcast on a Saturday. Normally it comes out on a Sunday. He watched the podcast Saturday night as soon as it dropped, and he came to church the following morning and told me he was devastated because he was at my house watching the Super Bowl. He was apparently talking about Kendrick Lamar. He's a big K Dot fan, and he did not get a shout out on the podcast as we were talking about the halftime show. I apologize. Hope this makes up for it. Brandon, we love you.
All right. And another one, good friend of mine. She also is a new subscriber. Her name is Diana. I want to give her a shout out, and we love you. And usually sports are not her thing, but she is supporting the channel, so much love there. Also, uh, couple of guys I ran into. They work at Vaporcraft here where I live, and really good guys. And they're like, "Hey, y'all need to talk more about UFC. We are very much into jujitsu, and they actually go to their gym, and they're in it. So I told them that yes, we would be talking about it. I know there's a big pay-per-view coming up here, what, in a month or two?
Less than, yeah.
So we'll be talking about that closer we get to it. I know, Brad, you were a big fan of UFC, still probably are, but really big back in college days. Chris, I know you were there with him, so I hopefully y'all will have a good amount to talk about the UFC when we get closer to it.
Yep. Do my best.
Yeah, I mean, I made the comment to you guys recently. One of my prized sports possessions. I have never actually done what I should do and getting I think they call it like a shadow box or a ghost box there that Chris has his. But I actually have a signed tap out shirt from when I met Chuck the Iceman Liddell, UFC Hall of Famer, my original favorite fighter. I've been in that MMA world for a long time, big time fan. It's certainly not that we are ignoring the sport or don't have any intentions of talking about it. I do believe it'll be on next week's podcast because we do have a big pay per view coming up. Got some big news just to kind of give a little bit of sprinkling of that. Ilya Taporia has recently vacated his UFC championship because the cut down to 145 was just too much on his body. And so now he has made the intentions known that he is going to move up to 155 and start competing as a lightweight. The number one and number three contenders are now set to face off for that vacant belt. So I'll definitely be watching for that one. Diego Lopez has been an up and coming superstar for a while now, but he's got a tough test. Former champion Volkanovski is probably going to be favored to win that fight, but it's coming up as well. So we'll talk about those fights as we get closer to them. Got some big events coming up in the UFC, so it'll definitely be here on the podcast for sure.
Yep.
All right. That's all I had. I just wanted to drop those names, and again, if you'd like us to put you on the podcast, get your name out there, give us a like, follow, comment, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. And
we're all looking forward to the day where there's too many fans to be able to shout out everybody that shows us love. Be honest with you, we're just not there yet. So if you want some love shown, reach out to any of us. Let us know. You all know who we are and how to get a hold of us. So we got you at this point for sure.
Absolutely.
don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. We're really trying to grow our social media presence here lately to varying degrees of success and failures. So be sure to look us up out there.
One more thing before we get off here. We've got a special episode coming. It will not be an EP, but it'll be the same kind of podcast format. We've got a very, very special guest that hopefully will add.
I've met her. She's not that special.
Well, at least she's going to make the podcast look a lot better than the three of us. So
maybe so. We'll see about that.
it is Chris's wife, Mary. So hopefully we'll have that released, shortly after this episode. So
yeah,
go tune in for that. It's going to be, again, a very special episode. It's very near and dear to my heart, and you'll learn about it in that episode.
Yep. Only other thing I can think about is let us know what you think about the new intro. Brian has been at work in the lab trying to cook up some new stuff for White Widow Sports. We want to keep things fresh. We're still learning. We're figuring things out and kind of getting them to the way that we like them, but we want to know what you guys like too. But let us know what you think about that as you guys are watching it. Other than that, I don't have anything, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. See you next time.
Y'all have a good week.